but judging by the fact that I'm getting half a litre of air in here per explosion, it's actually getting reasonably wide, wider than I thought, but it's coming very fast. Anyway, as soon as it gets up at the front here, reed valve's obviously going to open because the pressure at the front is high, atmospheric. It'll start shoving its way in past the reeds to start filling that gap, and the explosion will go. There's so much heat in here, radiation, heat and shock waves, that the fuel is just dying to ignite. It just really is. There are naked flames apparently still left in the front area around this conic ring, and that definitely will help ignite it. And then when the ignition then goes off, where you start the cycle again. But one of the things that happens that they say probably is creating the timing of that explosion is the vacuum wave. When that explosion went off, and I said a pressure wave went that way, well, a vacuum wave went that way. It bounces off the reeds. I don't think it opens the reeds. I've seen no evidence of that. But it has to bounce off the reeds, go back the other way, still as a vacuum wave, and then it has to go all the way down to the end here, and then when it gets to the end, it collapses in the opposite direction, goes back as the pressure wave. And the pressure wave comes through here, and just as he's coming up the front here, this is while these reeds are still sucking like mad from the vacuum, the other cycle. And when this pressure wave gets here, this is getting ready to fire off anyway, but that shake up of that pressure wave, compression one, slamming right through the guts of it, will guarantee the ignition just as spontaneous. So the cycle is supposedly the speed of sound, 330 meters per second, 330 meters, and this is these shock waves are traveling at the speed of sound. So when it goes bang, the one that's going to, well, the first one is this part here. They call it a quarter wave or something. So the quarter wave, the pressure wave, goes to the end here and then reflects back as a vacuum wave. So that'll be the first quarter wave is achieved as soon as it gets here. Now if I was to make this 4 times the length, so 2.4 meters, that would be the length for one cycle, and supposedly, and because it's running at 140 beats per second, so you've got to divide 330 meters, which is what it'll travel in 1 second in a dead long straight pipe, divide that by 140 to the hertz, so that's down to 2.4 meters then. So that's how much distance the sound is all traveling, 2.4 meters before each explosion. So it's only done 1/4 of it by the time it's got to the tail. So you think, oh, it's got to go back to the front, bounce off here, go back, bounce off there, come back, wham, ignition. That'll be 4 cycles. That's the way some people think they work. I've seen that written down in books. But the German cycle really states that the explosion goes off, the first cycle, or the first part of the quarter wave goes down fine, yep, returns as a vacuum to start drawing in the fuel. But right when it's coming back to draw in the fuel, you've got to remember that the vacuum wave that was created in here at the explosion already set off. Well, it's now at the tail end, and when the vacuum wave gets here, so we've only got 1 cycle really left to go before it comes back and ignites. So that's only like three, not a quarter wave anymore, it's going off after 3 waves. The ignition happens, and that fits the literature for this, because this is 850 mils to the front here, and to fit in with that 2.4 meters to make 1 cycle, divide that by 3, and that's what I get, 850 millimeters to here. So I realise, wow, it's getting a little complicated. Anyway, I don't know if you understand any of that. I don't speak it too well, but that's the German literature. It kind of fits it to me. That's where it's at. Now the other thing I found to be very interesting is if I just put this front in here and put a lock ring in there, it's harder to start. It's harder to get a sonic sound beat to get the reeds moving and break it into action. But if I put this up against the front, it kicks into life much quicker. Take that away, and then when it's running, I think it was 14-pound thrust I got maximum before it would just flood and just conk out. So 14-pound, and the sound was different. It sounded like the pitch was faster, but I'm not sure if it was just faster or weaker because it's not making the same. You know, I haven't got an oscilloscope or whatever you call it to check hertz. So anyway, the fact was, as soon as I put this on the front, screw it on, it changed everything. Instantly, she's up over 20-pound of thrust. So you tell me. Now, if you deal with musical instruments and sound instruments and that sort of thing, the first thing you might say is, well, when the return vacuum wave came all the way to the front and opened the reed valves, that vacuum wave didn't stop there. It continued all the way to the front. It opened the reeds, passed some air through, and then it continued on. The reeds could shut, and the wave continued to the front. When it gets here, it'll collapse on itself and go back as a pressure wave the other direction. And if this nose is set to the right length, it'll collide with the reed valves and give a little supercharge effect. Maybe it even goes inside and helps to do an ignition, cause ignition. I don't know. But the theory of that in my head is because if I run a longer header pipe up here somewhere, I lost thrust. When I came right back to here, going back just a couple of millimetres at a time, bang, I got maximum power here and gained thrust, easy. Now, if I went too long in a head, it creates, this then becomes a tuned pipe, and that interfered with the running of the tail end, and it would get all sorts of weird sounds happening. So that didn't like having too long a head. And any shorter, if I knock this down in half that length, it'll still lose power. And the other thing that helped was making this in intake shape. Had to make it like a racing car intake. What do they call it? Stacker, velocity stack. So as the air comes rushing in from the side, it got time to do its bend and hoot right in. That made a difference. Now, if you make this diameter any bigger, you'll in theory lose the grunt out of that vacuum wave. So that's not a good thing. You've got to close it down to get the strength of that vacuum wave. But if you close it too much, it'll restrict the airflow, so you'll lose power. So I had to do trial and error to find the right diameter on that intake as well. So I went through several intakes. I've got a whole collection of them over there. And this is the final one that made all the difference. The intake, the velocity stack, and it came up over 20-pound thrust with this tailpipe and just these reeds, not even an Argus reed setup. That's not a bad figure at all. I think depending on the weather and things, it gets very close to 25, which is the maximum this one can make in theory, 25, even if it had Argus reeds, apparently. But many Argus reed setups never ever tuned intake, see, so I'm wondering if I go Argus reeds, is it possible to get any more thrust again? Can I build on it, or will things actually get worse? I know you can get more air in with Argus reeds, and the reeds can last longer, but does it work with the shock waves? It all depends how fat these shock waves are. You know, if you've got a very narrow pressure wave, these reeds are going to work better, because they're working, you know, side on, not in a length direction. So I don't really know about that at this stage. And another thing is these tailpipes being flared. People often wonder why they work, or do they work? Yes, they do work. And the reason is, as the pressure wave expands here, it lets it go more gently. It makes a wider return vacuum, which gives more time and everything for air to get in at the front. If you make it too wide, once again, if the diameter gets wider, you're going to lose the strength of the pressure wave when it collapses. So you've got to keep it, you know, within a certain diameter. And in my opinion, it should be more of a curve. It's not to let the gas out smoothly, it's just to collapse it smoothly. But that's not quite so important. But yes, I do believe they do work. But you know, how much to do it depends on how good the things are working up at the front end. Like I say, it just apparently makes the vacuum return wave wider, and that sort of technology is to do with like exhaust pipes on two-stroke motorbike engines as well. Their theory on how it all works there is pretty much a match with this. So there you have it. I mean, there's some of the basics. So what I'm hoping to do next is make an Argus reed one, because these reeds snap off after about 2 minutes. I can't stop them snapping. Unless I try a better spring steel, which I haven't been able to get the best yet, too expensive and hard to get. So yeah, and whether or not this flame holder and louvers will work with the Argus reed setup, I don't know, because I don't know if they're making a vortex in there. That could be why it's working so well. If I have Argus reeds dumping in the centre, it might not work as good. And one of the reasons, one of the flaws that you might say I can see with Argus reeds is they dump so much air down the centre, dead centre, it comes hooting in so fast, and by the time it really wants to ignite and burn, it's already halfway down the flipping pipe. If you really want a good thrust, a good solid return of thrust, it really needs to come in from the side, so or even from the back. Purely so that when it goes bang, it's literally at a standpoint completely before it can have its effect. If it's no good coming down here at the speed of sound and then igniting it, it's just going to continue on down there, and there's going to be no push back against the front end. So Argus ones tend to throw a lot of fuel and gas down through the centre, unburnt, flames out the back, whereas this one doesn't. At least these sort of daisy reed valves bring the air to a real slow stop, literally, and mix it with the old combustion too. So it's not an issue anymore. But I'd like to see the Argus ones come in from the side. But how that'll work with sound waves passing by this way at the speed of sound, I don't know if they'll capture the full grunt of it or not. But there are a lot of other things you can do. There's always things you can do. You can bring it into a swirling pattern like this possibly does, that conic ring, bring it into it and stir it, so it has like a cyclone effect one way or another. That could literally bring it to a stop all right. And, well, it's not really even in a stop, is it? It just brings it into a spin. But it brings it to a stop as far as the front end goes, and even reverses it. So, the spinning factor could be a big bonus for pulse jets too. So, got to experiment with that idea too. So anyway, I guess that'll do, because I'm just going round and round saying the same sort of stuff otherwise. But anyway, this pulse jet's really impressed me. Otherwise, it even sounds good. Well, one question I've got for anybody that might be an expert on sound is, if I've got like a quarter wave happening down here, the first initial bang, quarter wave, going to come right out here to make 2.4 metres to make the full cycle. What I want to know is, are there any other standing waves of different frequencies hammering away inside the pipe? It could be a higher frequency where it's got high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure, anodes and nodes all through here. And that could play havoc on the front end with reed valves if not done correctly. It would be more likely to play havoc on Argus reeds actually. But I've often wondered whether or not there really is any resonance there. Anyway, Mum's here, got to go.